climb of the Molenberg. It could well have been Edwig van Hooijdonk who missed his pedals on the climb. Guido Bontempi it was. There he is, getting his feet back on the pedals. He starts the climb of the Molenberg. A little climb, only half a kilometre, but it's a brute. And the riders now are having to tackle this with a deficit of 8 minutes 20 seconds on those four leaders. And they're getting to grips here. Now, this is the chasing group that's trying to get away at the front because they're really going to have to get something going now. They've been steadily knocking off the minutes on every climb so far. But they've played out a lot of line with these riders, probably because the four riders up front, really the only one of any note in the professional world is Thomas Wegmuller. This is Johan Museo, who's just dropped back here, trying to break away now in this second group. He's got with him, I think, Yellow Nidam on the far right, and the man setting the tempo here, well, that'll be Johan Capio. Capio, the winner this year of the Hepvolk, and he really is coming into his own this year, developing himself with some good wins in the races. There's Nidam. Yellow Nidam, son of Henk Nidam, but he really is a superb rider now, Yellow Nidam, looking for the move that might finally eat into the lead. There's three riders just ahead. Well, that'll be Sammy Morels, Schmiel and Ken Gialta. They broke away just a few kilometres ago. Now these three are coming across, and this is a very, very good move by Lotto, because Lotto are bringing across their favourite, Johan Museu. They have a strong rider up there already in Sammy Morels, and if the two of them get together, well, these six could now fly from this leading group. It looks as though Museu, in fact, a little bit concerned about the proximity. He's waiting to see if the short, sharp climb of the Molenberg has done the damage he wanted. If he's got the gap, then he'll start putting his weight into this chase. He's going to come up right behind his teammate, Sammy Morels, and just let him know the captain's turned up, and now it's time to get on with some serious chasing. Well, they've managed to eat into that lead. As I say, 22 minutes was the original gap, 22 minutes 10 seconds to be exact. Let's have a look at this again now. Watch the centre of your picture, because this is where, in fact, Bontempi overcooked it on the bend, loses the traction on his back wheel, manages to get his foot off quick enough so he doesn't fall. He was balked a little bit, I think, by another rider on that corner. But anyway, he survived to live on. He's having a bit of trouble finding his feet again. This big man who's got tremendous form this year, Bontempi. It looks as though he might be in for a good year. Let's go back up to the chase. And in fact, these three riders are being joined. There's the six riders in the lead. There's a small group here coming across as well. San Remo, he comes here as the leader of the World Cup, and he's almost 36 years of age. There's also the champion Italian, Moreno Argentin, who won this race in 1990. Last year he won two of the Spring Classics here in Belgium. He's won this before, he'd like to win it again. So there are plenty of riders to take on Edwig van Hooijdonk in the fight to find out who will be boss of the Bergs. So let's join the action of the 76th running of the Tour of Flanders. And the big field in the Tour of Flanders have a lot to think about this year, because early on in the race, four riders have built a lead of 22 minutes plus today. They are now down to 8 minutes 20 seconds. Three riders are chasing them in between, and the distance still to go, some 53 kilometres. That's around 32 miles still to race. And the Molenberg is the next big climb on the horizon. There's now a lot of fluid movement in this bunch, but you know they've let the line run out long today. This four-man breakaway of Hervé Meeviche and Patrick Roland, both Belgian riders, Thomas Wegmuller of Switzerland and Jackie Durand of France. It was Durand who launched the first attack very early on, and they're still out in front. The gap is now coming down, and the counter-attacks are coming very, very heavily indeed from the Buckler team and from the Lotto team as they swing onto the cobblestone, and somebody slipped there. This is the climb of the Molenberg. It could well have been Edwig van Hooijdonk who missed his pedals on the climb. Guido Bontempi it was. There he is, getting his feet back on the pedals. He starts the climb of the Molenberg. A little climb, only half a kilometre, but it's a brute. And the riders now are having to tackle this with a deficit of 8 minutes 20 seconds on those four leaders. And they're getting to grips here. Now, this is the chasing group that's trying to get away at the front, because they're really going to have to get something going now. They've been steadily knocking off the minutes on every climb so far. But they've played out a lot of line with these riders, probably because the four riders up front, really the only one of any note in the professional world is Thomas Wegmuller. This is Johan Museo, who's just dropped back here, trying to break away now in this second group. He's got with him, I think, Yellow Nidam on the far right, and the man setting the tempo here, well, that'll be Johan Capio. Capio, the winner this year of the Hepvolk, and he really is coming into his own this year, developing himself with some good wins in the races. There's Nidam. Jelle Nydam, son of Henk Nydam, but he really is a superb rider now, Jelle Nydam, looking for the move that might finally eat into the lead. There's 3 riders just ahead. Well, that'll be Sammy Morels, Schmiel and Ken Gialta. They broke away just a few kilometres ago. Now these 3 are coming across, and this is a very, very good move by Lotto, because Lotto are bringing across their favourite, Johan Museu. They have a strong rider up there already in Sammy Morels, and if the 2 of them get together, well, these 6 could now fly from this leading group. It looks as though Museu, in fact, a little bit concerned about the proximity. He's waiting to see if the short, sharp climb of the Molenberg has done the damage he wanted. If he's got the gap, then he'll start putting his weight into this chase. He's going to come up right behind his teammate, Sammy Morels, and just let him know the captain's turned up, and now it's time to get on with some serious chasing. Well, they've managed to eat into that lead. As I say, 22 minutes was the original gap, 22 minutes 10 seconds to be exact. Let's have a look at this again now. Watch the centre of your picture, because this is where, in fact, Bontempi overcooks it on the bend, loses the traction on his back wheel, manages to get his foot off quick enough so he doesn't fall. He was balked a little bit, I think, by another rider on that corner. But anyway, he survived to live on. He's having a bit of trouble finding his feet again. This big man who's got tremendous form this year, Bontempi. It looks as though he might be in for a good year. Let's go back up to the chase. And in fact, these 3 riders are being joined. There's the 6 riders in the lead. There's a small group here coming across as well. So there's this now developing into a nice little chase group. That looks like Rolf Sorensen there, Ali Austria rider. We'll go down and have a look. And he's actually shouting at them. Maybe he's shouting at Ken Gialta here to just hang on while he comes across the gap. His teammate goes straight through. Van Hooijdonk is up here too, wearing number 1 as last year's winner. Now this is a very good group. And the other name on our screen, Marc Madio, the winner of Paris-Roubaix 1 year ago, has come across. This is a superb group now of strong men, and now we should see the lead come down very rapidly with those 4 riders out in front. Johan Capio having his best season thus far and willing to get on with the racing now on his homeland, the Tour of Flanders. He must have put in thousands of training miles on these narrow roads down here in Flanders over the years, and happy now to tap out the rhythm. A long, thin line, the peloton behind, not giving up yet by any manner of means. This group must be then about 9 strong. But it looks to me as though they're getting across. Roodborst is the location, 31 miles from the finish, and still to come, of course, the climbs of the Berendries, the Muur, the famous wall, and finally the Bosberg, which comes some 7 miles from the finish. And those should be enough to see the boys in the front back in this big peloton. It's not likely they could possibly survive what would indeed turn out to be the longest escape in the history of the Tour of Flanders. They're not that strong. Let me tell you a little bit about Hervé Meewisch, because he's a 23-year-old, second-year professional. He got his contract, in fact, with the Carrera team only largely after a suggestion from Eddy Merckx. And he's riding in the team now. He finished 57th last year in Paris Tours, and he's never won a race at all as a professional. Patrick Rowland, well, I would say that Patrick Rowland probably best remembered for a stage victory in the DuPont Tour last year in the United States, where he won the leg between Newark and Columbia. And that win also gave him a very brief lead in the event. But he too is not an outstanding rider. The most exceptional rider in that league group is, of course, Thomas the Tank, Thomas Wegmüller from Switzerland, turned pro back in 1987. Just look at Capio here, by the way, as he tries to really turn the screw a little bit tighter because the main field are latching on at the back. Well, Thomas Wegmüller is a class rider. He's won from a long breakaway once before. Well, he didn't win. He was second in Paris-Roubaix behind Dirk de Mol a couple of years ago. And now he's the driving force in that breakaway. The other man in the breakaway, Jackie Durand, he is a Limousin. He wasn't born in Limoges, but he lives down there at the moment. And although he's been racing since he was 13, he's a new professional rider in 1990, and he's won only one race. So that is why the race has allowed those 4 men their head today, because they have no confidence they will survive. Now they've got to prove their point and chase them down. Well, that was a lovely attack they had going there. Now just look at this. So many riders have got across that the power has been turned off, and Capio doesn't like it. He wants a little bit more action. What's the point of working hard if you're going to let it all go again, he thinks. And 23 seconds is the screen there, but that, I think, is this small group which is just built up over the main field. Number 3 coming through there, and that is Frans Maassen, who's got into the picture now. So Frans Maassen, this looks like the big figure of Dirk de Wolf, who has plenty of support here in Belgium. And it is indeed Dirk de Wolf. He looks as though he's about to crush his bike there, he's so strong. Little look at the camera, little blow out of the mouth, and he's just come across. In fact, there's the 50 kilometres to go pano sign. That's 31 kilometres, 31 miles rather, from the finish. And de Wolf has done a good ride to get across this gap. Although the bunch has certainly thinned, this has got to be a very big group indeed. Capio still up here. Sammy Morel's the Lotto boy, and now somebody has tried to slip away off the front. This is the only way they are going to bring back those 4 leaders. I'm sorry we can't show you pictures of the leaders at the moment, but the fact is that one of our helicopters bringing the pictures had a problem, and so we've lost the use of the camera up there, and which means that now we're going to have to watch, which for me anyway, and I'm sure you'll agree, is the more exciting aspect of the race, because the 4 riders up there are trying to survive. They're all working, as far as we know, all together, but this is where the chase is developing right behind. Bursterkouter and the Overweg, well, that's the Flemish word for a level railroad crossing, and there it is, and they're safely through that one. The narrow roads of Flanders, it's superb cycling country, and if you're interested ever in taking part in the Tour of Flanders, by the way, not, I hasten to add, as a professional rider, there is a tourist trial that covers the exact same route. It's run around September, and they get many thousands of riders coming down here just to ride the same route as the riders in the Tour of Flanders. Paardenstraat, 1,300 metres of cobbled road is the next serving on the menu, and you know, that's a shame that little breakaway didn't work, but they've brought it all back together again. And this is Frans Maassen now tapping out the rhythm at the front. Big Frans, who turned up with a great victory in the Amstel Gold Race last year, and he'll be there defending his title again this time through. In fact, having said all that, this is Gerrit Solleveld. They're very, very alike, but this is Solleveld now who's setting the tempo. We've got Solleveld, Van Hooijdonk, Frans Maassen, Nijdam, the kingpins behind the Buckler successes, and now trying to close down on what is really 3 unknowns and a very experienced long-distance specialist out in front. And that is Thomas Wegmuller. And now the riders, there's 2 riders down there from the Motorola team. That's a good sight. They're still looking for a very elusive victory to open up their season. Second year sponsorship by the American company, of course. And last year they made such a brilliant start, especially with Phil Anderson winning so well in the early months. But there we are. They haven't won at all this year. I suppose that's the look of cycle racing. And they're going to have to do something about wiping out the lead of these 4 riders pretty soon, before they get to the Bosberg indeed. Because once you're at the Bosberg, you've got 7 miles of rolling countryside and you're down at the finish in Meerbecker. 47.9 kilometres from the finish. That's around 30 miles to go. We're still waiting for the latest information on the times, but I would say now we're around about 7 minutes 10 seconds. And the chance now that these riders really must start to close down. This is Solleveld still doing a lion's share of the turn at the front. Try and keep this. He's being tailed there by one of the TVM riders. And 39 seconds they're showing us here, but these are little splits that are happening at the front of this group as they try to go clear now of the big peloton behind. And the Motorola rider who looks in the front there, I think it's Dag Otto Lauritsen who's riding near the front. Well, that's good to see Dag back onto form as well. There's Van Hooijdonk, slipped a little way down in the blue jersey. And this group has grown a little bit too ungainly now for a chase to be organised properly. Once they come off these cobblestones here at Paardenstraat, the next major climb will be the Berendries, and that'll come some 32 kilometres from the finish, which is exactly 20 miles, and by then they really need to be down to around about 4.5 to 5 minutes behind that leading 4 if they're going to have a chance of bringing them back before we get down to the finish. A lot of racing being done now. The whole ride, all of the riders here in a long, thin line. And there is confirmation. There's only 3 riders left. Look, Wegmuller, Meewisch and Durand. 7 minutes. Now, it's still possible indeed. That's the sort of time check I wanted to see, 7 minutes. The rider that they've dropped, in fact, is Patrick Roland, the 29-year-old from Belgium. and the stage winner of the DuPont Tour last year at Columbia. He has been dropped from that lead group, and that will be sweet news in the ears of this chase group now, because they will now feel happy that those front four riders are showing signs of cracking. Because you bet your life that word will have swept down through the peloton by either the motorcyclists or somebody on the roadside, but they will know that Patrick Rowland has been dropped from that lead group. 7 minutes the gap now. Heading down through Uppers Hoverstraat and on through Strijpen. And again, it's being left an awful lot of work here to the Buckler team, and nobody willing to help them bring back those three leaders. Oh, and that was a very tight piece of calling too there by Zolleveld. He almost took out our motorbike, but he straightened himself up. A big man to bounce over the cobbles, sits right back on the saddle now as he goes on that small stretch of cobblestone, searches for the gear with which he feels a little bit comfortable. Well, I wouldn't think that those people can survive now, because they really have got themselves a superb rhythm going here, but they could do with a little bit more assistance at the front. 1,700 metres of cobblestones here for Zolleveld, and he's the first man in the best position to plot the course. And in fact, news reaching us that Greg LeMond has had a little bit of trouble, and he's crashed but not seriously, and it sounds as though he may well have retired from the race. So that's rather sad for the Z team and for Greg, who still searches to find his early season form. One has that sneaking feeling that he's come to the European circuit this year in rather good condition. Time will tell the answer to that as Zolleveld continues to bash out the tempo. A tattoo there on his left arm, which I've never noticed before, I must say. Pulling this race into a long straight line. I'm surprised that nobody's trying here to get up alongside him and give him a hand, because they know now that this leading group of only 3 riders inside 7 minutes with every turn of the pedals. The seconds are knocking off, and this, don't forget, is a long breakaway that's been out there. It was started by Jackie Durand at the 45th kilometre of the race, and that was some 30 miles into the race, and then he was joined by Wegmuller and by Meewisch and then by Rowland. Rowland has now been dropped, and then they gained by the 90th kilometre, something like 55 miles into the race. They had an enormous lead of over 22 minutes, and since then they've been losing ground. The question is, can they survive? And I think you get good odds at the moment to say that they will not. There aren't many trees in this part of Flanders, but they do offer some protection, I suppose, as Zolleveld starts to rip the field apart here. He's done a tremendous piece of pacemaking. He's been on the front of this group now for so long, and his intention, of course, is to try and pull the Buckler team back into action. Jan Raas, who always wants results from the Buckler team. This year, Jan Raas said his team, he didn't want them to win so many races as they did last year, but he wanted them to win races of quality. Well, this would go down as the sort of race that Jan would like to see them win, because, of course, the Tour of Flanders, as it is here, the second round in the World Cup competition, the Paris-Roubaix still to come, and the winner of Milan-San Remo, leader of the World Cup, is Sean Kelly. And as far as we know, Kelly is right in the thick of it here today, although we haven't seen him, and he'll be wearing a white jersey if we do catch a sight of him, because he is the leader of the World Cup competition. And this is the one race, of course, that Kelly has always wanted to win. It's the one classic that the Irishman has never had a chance. Well, I say never had a chance in, because that really is wrong. He really should have won this race in 1986 when he was beaten in the sprint by Adrie van der Poel, and Sean Kelly totally misjudged it. Kelly should have been the winner that year, and that was the first of 2 second places, his next one coming behind his friend Claude Quillion in 1987. Now that says there remain 3 hills and 2 stretches of cobblestone still to come in this year's Tour of Flanders. So they're going to have to use those 3 hills now to rip into that overall lead of the 3 riders. Zolleveld, nobody helping him, but then he's still turning out a rapid pace here, and he won't be far below 28 miles an hour. And it's time to take on a little bit of food. No, indeed, this is a map of the course he's got here, and he's just checking now to see how much remains. And a quick calculation, indeed, I would suggest whether they can catch those three riders. We haven't had a time check since 7 minutes, but I would expect now to see it around 6. On towards the Berendries. This is hill number 12 of 14 of the Monts of Flanders. And this is a nasty little climb as well. It's largely asphalt, it's 900 meters, and it has a maximum gradient of 14%. A chance for somebody perhaps now to break away, because Zollefeld's been up there so long, he surely can't have a lot of strength left in his legs. He's staying up there too. He's continuing as they start the climb of the Berendries shortly. No sign at all of people like Sean Kelly. Johan Museo, who's played a quieter role since we caught him a few minutes ago after that breakaway, along with Sorensen and Madio. That looked a very useful attack, and it should never have got wiped out quite as quickly as it did. 42 kilometers in the finish now. There's still the leaving for Gerrit Zolleveld to set the tempo. It shouldn't be too long now before, in fact, we see Patrick Rowland, because as far as I know, he's just tootling along the road off the back of those three leaders he's left behind. His day is done, as it were. Moving up there on the outside, and this rider number 123 here is Andre Schmiel, and there's confirmation. 6.5 minutes now. It's coming down. The question is it coming down quick enough? 6 minutes 32 seconds as we approach the Berendries climb. Once we're up the Berendries climb, we'll be 20 miles from the finish. 6 minutes in 20 miles, one would have to gamble that they really do tire very, very quickly towards the end, and you'd expect that to happen as well. This is Rob Harmeling who's got to the front now. So the TVM boys now deciding it's time to give their rival Dutch team a hand at the front. It could well be that the TVM team will become Holland's #1 team next year, you know, because as the way it's going, PDM are withdrawing from the sport, Buckler are withdrawing from the sport, changing their direction of advertising. That leaves only Panasonic and TVM in Dutch cycling, although everybody is confident that both of the teams that are leaving will indeed be found new homes. Feeding station then, a chance for the riders to hear from the crowd too exactly the time gap. Zottegem and Harmeling ignoring the food, deciding that the remaining 20... Oh, having said that, he snatched his bag. I thought with about 25 miles to go, slightly less than that, they weren't going to bother to take on food. But Harmeling has broken his rhythm now, so he's loading the food in his pockets, and off goes the bottle for a souvenir. And the bag will follow very shortly. So Harmeling, TVM, setting the pace. They're going to be together again at the front. The gap is now down to inside 7 minutes. And the next time check we'll get will probably be on the Berendries. This has turned out to be a remarkable race. Well, it's a pity we can't just see the face of Thomas the Tank at the front at the moment, because I'm quite sure he's gritting his teeth and he's thinking that it might be possible now. He's been an exponent of the long breakaway ever since he turned professional, and he really can find the strength to survive enormous distances out in the lead. Well, just dropping down the side of our picture there, it looked to me as though it might well have been Patrick Rowland who's passed through. It was indeed Patrick Rowland, so they've wiped him out. He's completely blown to the world. I'm not too sure he knew the main field came past him there. It's a breakaway that's lasted about 180 kilometres, 190 kilometres for him. He's now been back in the field. Unlikely he'll reach the finish, I would think. For Patrick Rowland, they know now for sure there are only 3 men out there. And there's the squat sprinter figure of Johan Capio. And Capio continues to really threaten to have a terrific season this year. He's had a marvellous start to the season. He got off with a great win in Het Volk. He's also had a superb win in the Flèche Brabançon. And 6:15, 6 minutes 15, it's coming down. And Wegmuller, Meewisch and Giron survive now by only 6 minutes 15 seconds of the original 22 plus. And that is the sort of time check that they need. It's got to be down to 5 minutes over the top of the Berendries, I would think. Considering the speed that this race has been going, it says an awful lot for that breakaway, you know, up front. They must have really found the rhythm despite the distance that they have ridden today. And a breakaway going here. Jesper Skibby sitting at the front, deciding if anybody's going to come and give him a hand to chase down somebody who slipped away from the front of this group. We're now through Zottegem, and there's a counter-attack coming from the Ariostia rider. We'll see who it is when he flashes by. And just have a look. This looks like it might be Rob Harmeling, who's still out in front here, having a go. And indeed it is. So he's riding very, very strongly. Just dangling off the front, hoping he can tempt away one or two big names to start a working group that might well pull back those three leaders quickly. Still more than 6 minutes as we make the approach now towards the Bell and Grease. Big Dutchman, outstanding amateur rider. Looks a little bit too big for the hills of Flanders, doesn't he? But we'll see. And he's got a little group coming up towards him here. A little group, it's the whole peloton have just latched on. A long, thin line of riders. Again, they've picked up the leader, and the power has turned off that little bit. When you've got these riders out front, continuing to tap out the message, they're going to become very, very concerned about this breakaway now. They should be very concerned about it. And the team car coming through, and that in fact is the team car of one of the riders in the lead, Jackie Giron's team car, that is. And he's gone up now to tell Giron that I would think that there's a real chance that breakaway will stay away. Because Giron's gone through and Carrera's going through as well, and that's for Hervé Meeviche. And they must be quite surprised that Meeviche, who's never done anything in the world of cycling, is now up there in this breakaway, and they're going up to tell him to keep going. Again, the power has been turned off in this chase group. Well, perhaps Eddie Merckx, the great cyclist he was, has seen something in Meeviche that nobody else has seen, because it was only because Eddie actually asked Carrera a favour. They took him on board last year, and now he's finally putting in a great performance in a race in his own country, Tour of Flanders. And again, peloton leaving the work to one man, Rob Harmeling. Two on the inside here, there's Thierry Gouvenou, settling in now, a new pro last year. It's been a long wait for the people here. I think seeing the leaders go through some 5.5, 6 minutes ago. They're now seeing the bunch come through, and they might well be thinking that it's all over for the peloton. The peloton certainly aren't thinking that. They're relying now, though, on the slowing down at the front, which will come through tiredness of the distance. Because if they did survive to the finish, they would have been in the lead for over 220 kilometres. That in itself will be a record in the Tour of Flanders. Harmeling trying to keep his team man Johan Capio in touch here. Good piece of pacemaking. We've seen nothing at all of Moreno Argentin. Rolf Sorensen has put in a brief appearance when he made up the numbers in that 9-man chasing group. But you know, Argentin started off so well this season. He finished, he had something like 6 wins before they came here, having won 2 stages and the overall in the Sicilian week. Now we're heading up towards, it's still 4.5 kilometres, look, to the Berendries, so there's still plenty of time. Second in Milan-San Remo after Sean Kelly caught him just before the finish, and he won 3 stages in Tirreno Adriatico. That's Moreno Argentin. But since then, he's appeared to me to be losing the edge of his form. Well, at this time last year, of course, he was virtually unbeatable. Still Harmeling being left to do all of the work at the front. And there should be a change of partner if there's going to be any catching of that breakaway. Jelle Nijdam is resting some 4 back behind Thierry Gouvenou. I think that's Ralph Jerman in second place behind Harmeling here. And now I think 5:58 inside 6 minutes. We're about 3.5 kilometres from the Berendries. So Wegmuller, Meeviche and Giron, if they were beginning to think they might have this race in the bag, they want to start thinking otherwise, because the last few miles of Tour of Flanders is very, very difficult indeed. Very difficult indeed, especially with the climb of the Muur. It's a brute of a hill. It's cobbled all the way, and it is so steep, in fact, the following cars in the race have to be sent around the climb, because, and that's Jerman. Jerman has gone off. I think he slipped his chain. Well, that is really bad luck, because he was just moving right to the front here as we approach the Berendries. His chain is jammed, and Rolf Jerman is, I would suggest now, out of the Tour of Flanders, because you're not going to get back right now. Jelle Nijdam has got back in control at the front. He stomps his way up. And Nydam, what a strong rider Yellow Nydam is. Superb rider too. Multi-stage winner in the Tour de France. And you could say he's going at a gallop. Well, it's the barren fields of Flanders, and so often the weather at this time of the year is bad. It's not bad today, in fact it's quite pleasant. But you can imagine how the wind and the rain destroys a professional cycling peloton when they have these races in bad weather here at this time of the year in Flanders. And it's exactly at this point, they're saying here, where Moreno Argentine jumped away when he won the race last year. And indeed, for the moment anyway, we've got 3 riders who have gone, and these riders are trying to bring them back. Andre Schmiel again on the attack. Become a much improved bike rider this year, Andre Schmiel. He lives in Belgium at Charleroi, although he is a former member of the Soviet Union. Like so many Soviet cyclists now, they're turned professional, and they are making a big impression on the professional peloton. Harmeling again, I think it is, forcing his way back to the front. And Andre Schmiel decided, oh yes, he's going to get out the saddle and take his wheel. Well, they must now be eating into the lead of those 3 riders, because they have never eased off for the last couple of kilometres. There's been good, solid attacking riding now being delivered by the domestiques of the big teams, and including Nydam also putting in a lot of weight behind the chase. On a downhill here, although you can't really tell that from my helicopter shot, 7% going down. Oh, my goodness me, that was a bit wide. But Andre Schmiel lost his position with the leaders there as he almost overshot that bend. Very, very tight bend indeed. Caught him completely off guard. And the field now having to race. They're probably doing something like 60 or 70 kilometres an hour down this hill. Very narrow roads, and our motorcycle cameraman doing well to keep out of the way. And that's why we're taking our pictures at the moment, at least from the helicopter. Still TVM, Rob Harmeling setting the pace at the front. The rider up behind him there is one of the Gatorade riders. I don't think it's Dirk de Wolf. But in fact it is Dirk de Wolf, 162, that's him. And de Wolf also looking now for a chance to slip the field. What a strong man he is. Dirk de Wolf finished second in the World Championship in 1990, 5 minutes 15. The gap continues to tumble now from original 22:10 was the biggest time check we had. And now it's down to 5 minutes 15 seconds. It's still possible that they'll reel those 3 in, because once they hit the Bosberg, they're going to hit a wall, and they will literally hit the wall when they get to the Muur, because that's what it means in the Flemish language. Muur means wall, and that's what it's like. Well, this pressure has been on now, I would suggest, for the last 45 minutes. They've hardly slowed down. They've reduced that lead because it was something like 8¼ minutes with some 34 miles to go, and now it's down to almost 5 minutes, and we are still around about 20 miles to go to the finish. So it is very possible indeed that they will wipe this lead out somewhere around the Bosberg. Now there's been a crash here, and this is at the back of the pack, and in fact that is Sorensen down there, and Argentine looking over his shoulder. Argentine hesitating there not to race back, and Argentine waiting to see if Rolf Sorensen is going to get back on his bike. Now that brings back memories of a year ago when Sorensen in Liège-Bastogne-Liège did so much to help Argentine win Liège-Bastogne-Liège, both riders being in that league group. And it's almost as if Argentine didn't want to leave the side there of Rolf Sorensen, and he's come back, and look at this. Now, who would have thought that? Moreno Argentine has given his bike to Rolf Sorensen. It's a smaller bike, by the way, as you can see by the way he sat down there. But Sorensen is taking it, and that's an indication to me, in fact, that Argentine is not enjoying his Tour de Flanders today. He's assessed that Sorensen has a better chance of victory. He's given him his bike, but Rolf will not be happy on that bike. It's a couple of centimetres too small, and every time he sits down, I would think his legs crack. But that is a fine gesture by Moreno Argentine, a rider who's won 6 races this year. And there's the fall in the centre of the peloton. And it looked to me as though it was Sorensen who touched the wheel and went down. And the 1 or 2 riders have been delayed by the crash. And 1 or 2 more appear to have fallen off as well. What it has done, though, is split the field completely right in the middle. and it might well be that that field will stay split now. Telecom rider there, straightening his handlebars. But the important thing is that Sorensen has received the bike there from his team captain Moreno Argentin, and that might be a little favour return. Let's go back up to the action now, which is still coming thick and fast, and the attacks are still being launched here now because they're trying desperately to eat into the lead of some 5 minutes and 15 seconds. This is Schmiel again at the top, heading up now towards the Berendries climb, a 14% maximum gradient, almost a kilometre in length, and it is a short, sharp and very nasty little climb, but they'll take it very quickly. Andre Schmiel there. And sitting on the wheel is Stephen Hodge, the Australian rider who's come so good these last 2 years, developed to become one of the strong men of the Once team, where he rides alongside Marina Lajareta, who's riding his last season this year, and we'll all be sorry to see him go. What a marvellous rider he is, the Spanish rider. And he only won one stage in the Tour de France, and when he won that, he didn't realise he'd won it because he thought there were riders in front of him. So Stephen Hodge feeling very frisky now on the Berendries, Schmiel marking him nicely. And I'm wondering if at the back the race remains split after that crash there. But Stephen has gambled on holding that gear and that rhythm all the way to the top, and I think the legs just cracked, and he's now having a problem to keep turning that gear up right over the top. He's looking over his shoulder. It wouldn't surprise me very shortly he goes down there and drops it down a gear. But he's coming over the top and keeping it going nicely out of the saddle. But everybody has marked Hodge, and there goes the gear change. And the tempo he's created there is going to keep the main field here pulling back on those three survivors. Just to remind you, I'm sorry we can't show you any pictures at all of those three riders